Welcome to What Drives You with your host, Mike Gourdet. Human solution consultant from Seattle, Washington. It is now time to sit back, buckle up for the show that drives the asking question of what drives you. And now your host, Mike Gourdet.
Welcome to this week's edition of What Drives You, the show about why we do the things we do. I'm Mike Gourdet, your host, a human solutions consultant here in Seattle, Washington. Today, we are going to be talking to Sam Dyer from the UK. He's going to talk to us about firewalking and his purpose in life, and I think you'll find that fascinating. And then we're going to talk about emotional outbursts and what those are. And then we're going to answer the question of the day, which is, why don't people mind their own business? So just stay tuned. We'll be right back with Sam. Welcome to this week's interview. I'm talking with Sam Dyer straight out of the UK. Hi, Sam. How are you doing?
Hi, Mike. Yeah, great. Thank you very much. It's fantastic to be here.
All right. So tell us a little bit about yourself.
Sure. I'm a fellow podcaster. That's something I've just got into fairly recently, just before Christmas. So, which is all linked in with my purpose, which we'll come on to, I'm sure. I do things like, for example, coaching, training, that kind of stuff, which, as we all know, without mentioning the dreaded word, it's been an odd time over the last 12 months or so. So I am changing like the offering a bit in terms of doing some online courses and things like that. One thing I'm really itching to get back out and do is firewalking, because that is something you'll be pleased to know I am qualified and certified to do that, by the way. I don't just go and set fire to things and then get people to walk over it. So
that's
things
fantastic.
like I love it. It's amazing. So firewalking, walking on broken glass, snapping arrows with the nice little soft part of your neck. We do all sorts, chopping boards, all that kind of stuff, and it's brilliant. There's not really any way that I've found that I would say you can do it online as a virtual experience. Don't get me wrong, there are ways of doing a virtual firewalk and such, but I just really want to get back out there on that one.
Okay. Well, that kind of leads right into the question. What are you passionate about, Sam?
Well, you may have guessed one of them. I mean, I think it's worth touching on. For me, I really did find my purpose last year, and I know for many people it was a horrible year. And don't get me wrong, I mean, I had bits of it where I was really frustrated, really angry. I'd done a lot of looking into things like, for example, what you might call the kind of alternative stories, so the non-mainstream media type stuff for surrounding COVID and so on. My background as well is NLP, neuro linguistic programming. I particularly like the L part of that, the linguistics. So language will pull me into things. So, for example, I don't know about the same for you guys, but over here, we definitely had a lot of times news using words like coronavirus and COVID-19 interchangeably, using deaths from or deaths with interchangeably. And these are all different things. So that's
Right.
kind of what got me in. Anyway, I don't want to dwell on that or get too deep in the detail. But luckily, and I do say luckily on purpose, is that it got me quite frustrated at times. I wrote a 3,000 word essay of just really quite a cathartic experience, me putting into words what I had learned and what I'd found out by doing various pieces of research. I kind of come out of that later in the year, went back down the rabbit hole again, so to speak. Got really quite frustrated, and then my wife pointed out that she said, you're just getting more and more angry with this. And I said, yeah, and I totally know that, but I also found that it was part of the process, and throughout that I then had looked at a load of different things. I have to understand, I was kind of in the mindset of thinking, I want to do something, I need to start something, I need to stand up against something, but I didn't know what or where or anything. I knew what I didn't want it to be.
Uh-huh.
I didn't want it to be anything that would incite violence or protesting or anything, or turn into something that could run away from itself. So I had all these kind of things. And what I realized was that it was creating an inner conflict. Part of my not being able to find a way forward was the fact that I had an internal conflict, and then pieced together a few things, because when you start to look back at your life and you join up the dots and you look for the themes, and you say, okay, well, plus friends telling me like you're normally the one that brings a smile to the place and makes people happy, and so on and so forth. And with the talks to my wife and all of these things together, I worked out really that my purpose is to share love, light, and laughter. Now, I actually had the words a different way round, but I have a business partner who is also a coach, so we coach each other on things. And so he said, no, the with what you're saying, the right order is love, light, and laughter. I think I said love, laughter, and light originally, or something. So we talked through that, and that's kind of where how you and I ended up talking, because
Right.
I've part of doing that, or finding that, it's like I've been plugged in, if that makes sense. Now, and then you said, like, what drives you? I suppose we've all got various things that drive us. So things like our values drive us, our families drive us, our we have things that we move towards, we have things that we want to move away from. So we have all these drivers. The thing that for me kind of like puts fuel in the car, so to speak, if I'm the car in that sense, is feeling like I'm really connected to the universe on this. And as I've said to people a number of times before, what I equate it to is, over the last few years, it's like I've been on the right freeway. And if you've got like one of your really huge ones like you guys have in the States, we only have 3 lanes in the UK, but you know, one of your big 6-8 lanes, the type of thing that on the edge of LA and all the rest of it.
Yeah.
And it's like I was on the right freeway going in the right direction. And so everything was kind of cool because I was going from lane to lane. And so everything was fine. Now I feel like I'm totally in the right lane. And it's like it is like a source. I mean, I would call it, you know, I talk of terms like universe and source. And that's what it feels like. It's like I've got this constant energy that's available to me, as being now really truly in touch with my purpose.
Okay, well, that certainly sounds like you are very, very excited about that. I know that for, like you mentioned, a lot of people have uh, tried to deal with this last year in various ways, and some of it isn't so hot. And some people have really looked internally and changed the way they look at life, and how they are going to move through their lives. And you know, that's not too much farther than what happened for me, but
Right.
the 8-lane highway certainly is a good analogy.
It doesn't translate in the UK quite so well, but I do have to say, imagine it's like one of the big American ones. But yeah, that's what it feels like, and just it's like the only way I can try and describe it is it's like it's something outside of me, yet through me. So in that sense,
Yeah.
it's not me. It's not coming from within me. It's external from me in that sense, but it comes from within. So that's why I term it as, to me, connection is really important. I find, you know, I know we all have different values, we all have different needs as well, but certainly for me, connection is huge, and not just with humans, with feeling that there is something bigger, wider, whatever that might be. You know, some people will say God, some people will say the universe, some people will say source, and I'm kind of gradually starting to figure out the difference between these things, because to me, I think the universe is like all around us. So you've got the if you like, the physical sense of the universe, but you've got the universe in the sense as well. Again, my opinion, the universe in the sense of there is a kind of collective consciousness. There's certainly, I believe, we're all energy, and so we're all interlinked and interrelated in that sense. But source to me is like, it's like a power source, and that is something similar yet slightly different.
Okay, so you define your passion as love, light, and laughter, right? Is that what you're saying?
I would define, that's what I would say my purpose is. My purpose is to share that, and that can take form through many different things. So I've got a Facebook group, I've got a podcast, I also do things like we said about the coaching training, also the firewalks and so on and so forth. So, but if you like, that it's underpinned and it's coming from my purpose, rather than it being, oh, I do this because it's a job or it's a way of earning money. You know, it's there is a higher reason, a higher purpose for it.
Okay, so this is a little off topic because you've mentioned this. How do you get trained to be a certified firewalker?
Well, you go to an academy. I mean, it's amazing, really. So if you like, if you want to call it, like, say, the modern firewalking movement. So when I say modern, I'm talking from, you know, 80s, 70s, 80s, that kind of time. There's a chap who's very famous throughout our community called Tolly Burkan, and he was actually the guy that trained Tony Robbins. Now, many people will not know the name Tolly Burkan. Most people will know the name Tony Robbins, and if you've ever been to a Tony Robbins event, you'll know he does firewalks as part of it. So the same guys so Tolly, the same guy that trained Tony, also trained the people that I was trained by. So, you know, you do a course, which is the Firewalk Instructors Training course. Simple, it does what it says on the tin, and you learn how to do it, because, yeah, you know, you've got the technical points of view. So we're very picky about the wood we use, and making sure, for example, I'll only set a fire that's with the same species of wood, so you don't mix it up and end up with some parts burning quicker and higher than others. So that's really important. So there's a lot that goes into the technical aspect of it, but the biggest thing, you know, is about it's about the head, it's about the mind, it's the body, it's getting people into the right place to actually enable them to walk over what are often 1300 to 1500 degrees Fahrenheit burning coals.
Yeah.
So this is hot, you know.
Oh yeah, and it's a very interesting phenomenon. Is that you can take somebody right off the street and have them walk across these coals. That's a very interesting.
So within the space of an hour and a half to 2 hours, you know, we can get someone going across hot coals. And most likely, as soon as they do it, they want to go back again and do it again, which, even doing it immediately again, they'll get a different experience, because you already know kind of what to expect. So it's one of those things, a bit like the way that bees shouldn't fly. You know, it's one of those that, you
that's
know,
right.
The wings are not big enough for the body and all that kind of stuff. You know, you shouldn't be able to walk over that. I mean, I tell you, you know, what we do is tame. You know, if you look, for example, you can look it up on YouTube and stuff. If you look up what they do in Tamil culture, you'll see guys sat playing the drums, sat in the fire. Spain, one of the traditions is that you carry your spouse over the fire as you walk across it. In Hungary, they'll have 4-year-old kids going across the fire. You know, so it's what we do, certainly in the States and in the UK. What we do is tame in comparison, and yet, you know, the impact of it is massive. You know, it is quite literally life-changing, because you realize, if you can do that, what else can you do? And that's to me, that's the key.
Yeah, that's one of the interesting things about human behavior, since I study it, and I've been in the psychology field for so long, is that there's so many things that we haven't answered yet that is fascinating. And one of them, you just mentioned that, and there, how people can create a mindset around something and then completely change everything about their life. It's really an interesting phenomenon.
Oh, definitely. Because the thing is, we all have beliefs, and beliefs are they're no more than stories that we repeatedly tell ourselves. And
Right.
if you say something enough, you will believe it. Or indeed, if someone else says it to you enough, you will believe it. And then what really gets dangerous, potentially, if it's something negative I'm talking about, is if you put the words "I am" in front of it, because
Mm-hmm.
then it all of a sudden it goes up to an identity level. So I am useless, I am slow, I am stupid. All of these things, you're not just saying, oh, I behave like that. You're saying you are it, that it's
Yeah.
become your part. And this is why it's so important. We have to tell ourselves better stories to enable ourselves to actually live more of the life that we want to lead, and that to me, that's so much what it's all about, I think.
Yeah. That's, yeah. I can't disagree with you there. It's just, it's just so on point. Um, so your podcast, is your podcast called Love, Light, and Laughter, or is it?
So the Facebook group is called Love, Light, and Laughter. The podcast is called 108 Big Words.
That's right.
So the reason for that is that I like having, like I would consider we're doing now, those big word type conversations. It's not the little things. It's talking about the big things in life that often will get pushed away or swept under the carpet, or, oh, let's put the telly on instead.
Right.
So it's words like miracles, love, faith, spirituality, and anything that invokes like a big conversation. And I've picked 108 because 108 is a special number in a whole load of different things. I don't know, is that something you're aware of, the significance of 108 as a number?
I can't say that I have any real connection to that at this point. No.
No. Okay. So there's a number of, I mean, again, look it up on Wikipedia. There's so many different references. The one that I like the best, I would say, is that the one represents I, or self. The O represents the shape of the world, the whole,
Mm-hmm.
and then the 8 is to represent the infinity sign. So
Okay.
that's the kind of setup of it. It's got significant similar meanings in Hinduism, in yoga, Sanskrit. I think it means peace, if I remember rightly. There's like a whole bunch of different things as to what it means. And when we did our final walk, as I would call it, for our firewalk instructor training, we did 108 firewalks in one night. So
Okay.
again, that's got a real significance to me as well, hence why seemed like a good name for a podcast.
Well, that certainly makes more sense now than just a random number.
It's definitely not random. No,
Yeah.
nothing's random. I have this conversation with my wife so often because she'll use the word random, and I'm like, it's not random, is it? Isn't it?
Yeah.
There's no such thing as random.
No such thing as consequences. Or no, coincidences, not consequence, coincidences.
But even see, again, I go in with the language of, think of what the word coincidence is. It's just coincidence. It just means one or two or more things, are happening simultaneously or close to. And that's what I love about language. So we've taken a word like that, and then the connotations of it is that it means it's random. Well, actually, no, it's just saying that there is a coincidence between two or more things. Language is so rich; it's fantastic.
Yeah, I'm a wordsmith too, so I wouldn't call myself a linguist, but I do enjoy learning about words and the interesting phenomenon of how powerful that they can be because of the beliefs and meanings that we attach to them.
Yeah.
So,
but again, I mean, look at there's two words. If you think spelling, so how to spell something, but you can also have that as the verb of to cast a spell, spelling.
mm-hmm.
So if you even think with something like that, is and our, our words do cast spells. We cast spells on ourselves all the time in that sense. We are,
Yeah.
what's the difference between watching something like a Disney film where you've got a witch casting a spell over someone and they're acting in a certain way? It's a great metaphor for life. If you tell yourself that you are not worthy or not good enough or you're not going to be successful, you are creating a spell on yourself and you're going to act in that way. So hence why we have to do the work to get ourselves thinking better, because as amazing as our unconscious mind is, the prime directive, as you'll know from your psychology, is just to help us survive. It's just to live.
That's right.
It's not make yourself super successful or make yourself become the best human being you can. It's just to get by onto another day.
That's right. That is exactly right. Our psychology is an extension of our brain's need to survive, and a lot of it is not effective when we are in certain situations, and a lot of times it becomes our regular situation, and that's where we get all these crazy depression and anxiety and all these hurtful things for us. Which is it's an interesting concept that in the effort of having us survive in our modern day society, our brain hurts us. It's a kind of a weird situation there.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's very true, and there's a lot of things that we do like that as well, because I mean, if you think we talk in coaching and such, like we talk about secondary gain. So in other words, it's something that you're getting out of something that you feel is positive. So let's say it's your unconscious feels is positive, and yet it might be at odds with your conscious mind that says, hey, I don't want to do this anymore. So let me give you an example of someone who's smoking cigarettes, and they say, right, I don't want to smoke anymore. I hate this, or I don't know why I keep doing it. The secondary gain for them might be that it's the only real connection that they get with their boss every day, or maybe it's like, say for example, that them and their spouse or partner or whatever, that's their thing in the evening, that they go outside into the garden and they smoke cigarettes together. So they're you can end up being scared that you're going to miss something or something's going to be lost, and that's what I say. Yes, your unconscious is your best friend. It can be your worst enemy as well. But all with good intentions. It's the friend that's always there with good intentions, but doesn't necessarily do the right thing for you.
Yeah, I come from a martial arts background, so I call that the warlord. And if you let the warlord alone, it goes around and conquers everything without thought. So you have to rein in the warlord and point it at what you need it to do, instead of letting it just run rampant all over the place. So
yeah, it's a great analogy, that definitely.
I like that. So all right, well, that's about it for our time. Is there any other things you'd like to add on the end of that?
Yeah, I would just love to leave you with my favorite quote, if I may.
Yeah.
This is by a lady called Marianne Williamson, who most of your listeners, I would hope, would recognize her name, because of course, as well as being an author and so on, she was also, I don't think she got too far with running for president, unfortunately, but an impressive woman. And one of the things she said was, our deepest fear is not that we are inadequate. Our deepest fear is that we are powerful beyond measure. It is our light, not our darkness, that most frightens us. We ask ourselves, who am I to be brilliant, gorgeous, talented, fabulous? Actually, who are you not to be?
Yeah.
You are a child of God. Your playing small does not serve the world. There is nothing enlightened about shrinking so that other people won't feel insecure around you. We are all meant to shine as children do. We were born to make manifest the glory of God that is within us. It is not just in some of us, it's in everyone. And as we let our own light shine, we unconsciously give other people permission to do the same. As we are liberated from our own fear, Our presence automatically liberates others.
That is actually one of my favorites. I have,
Really?
well, the first part, I don't usually go very far into it.
Yeah.
But
I mean, I often just use the top part, so to speak, as well. And I would say as well for your listeners, if God is too much of a charged word, then hear universe, or hear whatever in your own language makes sense. I think the message remains the same. And I think, for me over my life, when I look at it, Mike, it just really, I understand so much, and it resonates so much about the idea of that it's our light that most frightens us, not our darkness. You have to step into your own light and do the best you can.
Absolutely. So, okay, Sam, well, thank you for joining us today. And
Well, thank you for having me.
Yeah, I hope we can connect some more. I know you mentioned your podcast. You would like to do something with me. That would be awesome.
You're coming on mine. That's a fair exchange, isn't it? Definitely.
I think so. Yeah.
Yeah, that'd be great.
All right. Again, thanks a lot. I hope everything's going well over there in the UK weather-wise. It's kind of dreary here, but that's normal.
Same here.
So, thanks for hanging with us. We'll be right back with our main section. Just hang tight. And thanks again, Sam, for joining us. Today, we're going to talk about emotional outbursts. Now, you probably already have an idea just from what I said that I'm probably going to be talking about people flying off the handle, yelling, screaming, anything like that. But there are also other types of emotional outbursts. And specifically, I'm talking about laughter and I'm talking about crying. There are a lot of theories about why we do this in social situations. There are theories that laughter and crying are social bonds, or social bonding mechanisms, rather, which science is trying to figure out. But here's the thing about this. From just a personal perspective, or just from a singular person, an emotional outburst is a release of emotion, and it's often due to a buildup of energy inside of us. Now, if you remember, I talked a little bit about emotions in one of the former episodes being an arousal of energy, or an increase of energy. And typically speaking, when we see an emotional response in a person, what we see is an arousal of energy, and then it peaks and then it comes back down. And how we interact with that emotional state, meaning what kind of thoughts we attribute to it, what kind of things we do, that emotional state either passes by very quickly, or we elongate it by habitual thinking or ruminating or things like that. So if I get up in the morning, and I kick the coffee table with my pinky toe and I enrage myself, I can then use that to create a narrative or a story about the rest of my day, which revolves around being angry. So my emotion becomes a state, my state becomes a mood, and that's how that kind of works. But what I'm talking about specifically today is the emotional outbursts. And this is where we get to we have this emotional state that builds, and we have to release that energy. And we release it through these mechanisms: laughter, crying, anger, So what's going on here? Well, this is what's called a catharsis in psychology terms. We are releasing that pent up energy. Now, typically speaking, cathartic release is considered to be a very healthy activity, but that's changing over understandings of things as we move along in our understanding of human behavior. Crying releases a lot of endorphins and things like that. So we're seeing that crying is a soothing activity. It's the same thing with laughter. Laughter creates some of the same stuff. Anger is a little different. Interestingly enough, these are all still emotional releases. We are trying to get rid of the buildup of energy. And if we think about that from the survival standpoint, there's some discomfort in holding that in. So, for instance, with laughter, if we go back to, say, Freud believed that laughter was a release of nervous energy because laughter was often involved around things that we find uncomfortable in social settings, like talking down to people or people falling. Slapstick comedy is basically laughing at somebody else's misfortune, and we often do things like that. So for him, it was this idea that we were releasing repressed emotions about other people, and that may be true. But from I guess a more physical aspect, we don't do well with these heightened states of arousal. And I say arousal not in the sexual term, but in the more general term. Is as we get emotional, we generate energy in our bodies, and it becomes uncomfortable. So we have to get rid of it. And by getting rid of it, we allow that peak to go down to the other side, and we can come back to our comfort state, which is our neutral state. And that's kind of where we want to live. There's a lot of issue about the comfort zone, right? If you're in any sort of personal development or even in the realm of entrepreneurship or even in the realm of job searching and anything like that, we're always talking about getting out of your comfort zone. That's where discoveries are made. That's where growth happens, blah, blah, blah. But the fact is that the human body wants to be there. We want to maintain a level of non-energy because that's our survival mechanism. Our survival mechanism is based around the idea that we don't want to be expending energy. Why not? Well, because if we're expending energy, we are losing energy, and we don't want to lose that. That's that scarcity mindset. We are best at conserving our energy. So the interesting piece to this is that as we build up an emotional response from whatever event that we perceive, that we created a narrative about that creates the emotion, it becomes very uncomfortable for us to hold it in. And so we have to release it. And by releasing it, we have these outbursts. Laughter, crying, angry outbursts. Now, the difference is, interestingly enough, is that we call angry outbursts venting. But there's a lot of studies that showing that when we vent anger, we don't actually create a release or a calmness. We actually build up the anger response in our bodies or in our minds so that we start doing it more and more often, which is not the same thing necessarily with laughter and crying. But with anger, you tend to see people who vent, they continue to vent. So they build a behavior around venting, and then that creates this negative feedback loop that it becomes very unhealthy for the person. So in this instance, this cathartic release, which catharsis usually means a healthy release of energy, becomes an unhealthy release of energy. And this is how this kind of stuff kind of gets a little bit complicated, because again, we're always trying to simplify everything, just like I'm doing right here for you. I'm trying to simplify all this stuff, and it doesn't always, when we don't understand the nuances or the complexities, it gives us a false impression of something that we're looking at or seeing. So that's one of the things that's very important about all the things that I'm talking about through these. I think we've been going for about 19 weeks now. Is that even though I'm trying to simplify all this, it's very complex, these interplays of emotion, thoughts, behaviors, identity, all these things mixing together to create the uniqueness that is you. The interesting thing is, and I talk about this quite often, you've heard it from my former podcast. You've also heard it in some of the podcasts I've guested in, if you've seen those, is that we are deceptively simple creatures. There is a limited range of responses that a human being can have based on the input they're getting. And every single human on the planet has the exact same responses in a range. What makes human behavior so complex is how those responses are activated, treated, patterned during those events that creates and that's really what creates the uniqueness of humans. That's why you are unique, because all of the information that you're gathering and you're placing in your brain and memories and things like that, you are creating the uniqueness of you through these complex, or rather from these very simple responses. And if you know anything about quantum theory or chaos theory, this is the idea of like fractals being these little random bits of information that over time they create patterns. And that may not be completely accurate, but that's how I sort of do it in my head. So when we have an emotional response, it puts us in an uncomfortable position. And what does that create? That creates pain. That creates a pain sensation. And we want to release that. And so we have emotional outbursts. This is, we can run the gamut all the way around. This is why we see people who are depressed. You see people who are very depressed, they will have these moments of severe irritation and anger bursts. The same thing with rage. If you haven't seen some of my other stuff, I used to have a big problem with rage because I would suppress my anger and it would come out sideways. And it's kind of like the analogy here is the waterbed, which if you're a younger viewer, maybe that's not a thing, or maybe that's not a real good analogy for you. But if you press down on the corner of the waterbed, everything else rises up. And that's kind of what happens when we repress or suppress emotions. Now, repressing an emotion is something that we do unconsciously. It's when we unconsciously avoid an emotion that we find uncomfortable. In other words, we deny. It's denial. We're using a denial function in order to ignore something that we don't want to feel. Suppression is actively trying to ignore or hold in an emotion that we think may not be appropriate. And this is, again, we can look at all kinds of different manners in which this is in keeping with social rules. You're not allowed to do certain things when you're in social settings. We also look at this across gender rules. Even still today, with everything that's going on, men are still taught to suppress certain things. They're not allowed to cry. So they suppress that side of them. And then they are encouraged to be aggressive. Now, I'm sure there's some correlation between these two, because if I'm suppressing something over here, like the waterbed, it's going to be coming out over here. So it, in a sense, can fuel the anger that it's okay for men to eject out into the world. Okay. So here we are, running through life, suppressing and repressing emotions, and we have responses to those, and we get the energy up, and that energy has to go out. That energy has to leave us. And for certain outbursts, it does wonders for us, and other things, it doesn't do us very well. I hope that makes sense. I know it's very difficult when we start trying to see the layers and layers and layers of what goes on with something that we attune to very simply. So when we see somebody who gets upset and yells at somebody, whether it's because they're wearing a mask or not wearing a mask, or whether it's because they got their food wrong or whatever it is that we have this need to simplify it, but understanding what's going on there can be helpful in our own sense of things. And it also helps us understand why things should, and that's a terrible word to use, but why things should occur. Why we should learn how to express our emotions in proper ways, why we should not suppress certain things while engaging in other different behaviors. Now, why we need to think a little bit differently about how we express certain things. Expressing anger certain ways, it doesn't do us any good. In fact, it has the opposite effect of these other things that I mentioned. So that's today's discourse on human behavior. We're going to come right back, and we're going to talk about the question of the day, which is, why don't people mind their own business? So we'll be right back. Why don't people mind their own business? That's the question today. Why don't people mind their own business? And this is something I was unfortunate enough to try and answer on a social media post. Somebody had written this question: why don't people mind their own business? The answer, or an answer, is acceptance versus rejection. Okay. Now, if you remember the older talk about this, is that we fear rejection, and we're always looking for acceptance. And this is a complex system. As a human being, I want to maintain my individuality, but I also need social input. I need validation from others. I need acceptance from others. These are needs. There is a very simple analogy that describes this, that no one is an island. We need to have acceptance from other people. One of the ways in which we do that is by checking in on each other. So if I'm not minding my business, if I'm paying attention to somebody else's business, it may be because I'm looking for the right social cues to use in that situation. Now, the other reason is that I'm going to externalize my belief systems onto them, which is where this post come from, right? So when we are gathered in groups, because it's an unknown situation and we fear the unknown, we go about trying to fit in. When in Rome, right? When in Rome, do as the Romans do. And that's when we look around us, and if we are outnumbered, we're going to tend to follow the crowd. Okay, so then we get into group dynamics, and this is what I talked about, people joining into riots and things like that. We're going to tend to look at everybody else and join them because we need acceptance from them. It doesn't matter if, again, this has a very solid foundation of how much independence we can exert in these events. Certain people are very individualistic who resist these a lot better. A good example of strong individualistic behavior would be a very popular, or I guess it would be a very famous picture of a man standing in front of the tanks that are entering Tiananmen Square in China. Okay, that act was somebody, and interestingly enough, a cultural ideal of conformity. This person had a very individualistic response. He stepped out into these lines of tanks in order to stop them from doing what they eventually did. So when we are in groups, we're going to try and find a balance. Now, the second piece to that, again, is that I'm going to externalize my behaviors on other people, my beliefs, my values, and things like that. And when I do that, I want them to conform to mine. And when I am looking for conformity, that's when minding my own business becomes a negative quality, or not minding my business becomes a negative, because I'm paying attention to you and then I'm going to get you in trouble. Now, the reason why I'm getting you into trouble is because I want you to conform to my ideals of whatever the social rule is that I'm trying to get you to conform to. So instead of completely rejecting you, I'm going to punish you in order for you to comply with my beliefs, bring you into the fold so that I can accept you. See how that works? I know it's a little complex. So this is sort of the answer, or an answer to that question. Why don't people mind their own business? There's two things going on there, a couple of things going on there. Now, of course, I wrote this in a more simple form, and the person that posted the question actually told me I was wrong, and then told everybody else they were wrong. So I asked them to please enlighten me. And of course they came back and said, because they ain't got nothing better to do. Okay, that's valid. So that's another reason. So that's one of the reasons why people don't mind their own business. So thank you for joining us this week. Have a great week. We'll see you next week. Bye-bye.